To have or to be, that's the question. So Lao Tzu once said, the way to do is to be. And Meister Eckhart once said, people should not consider so much what they are to do as what they are. So To Have or to Be is the name of a book that's enriched the lives of many people. And it was written by Erich Fromm. In this video, I'll explain some of the key ideas, how I apply them, and how they've enriched my life. If you're one of my ethics students, this video and book is relevant to virtue theory, Buddhism, and existentialism. So after counseling thousands of individuals, Fromm argues that there's a problem. And the problem is people are in the having mode of existence instead of the being mode. That's the diagnosis. The diagnosis is we adopted an attitude of having instead of being. People either add themselves up based on what they possess, what they have, or they use themselves up in the process of becoming. So let's turn to Fromm to better understand the many ways to distinguish between having and being and to apply this distinction. In chapter 1, he presents two poems to help us better understand the difference between being and having. The first poem goes like this. Flower in a crannied wall, I pluck you out of the crannies, I hold you here, root and all, in my hand. Little flower, but if I could understand what you are, root and all in all, I should know what God and man is. So Tennyson's poem, according to Fromm, represents the having mode. Now let's consider Basho's haiku, which represents the being mode. When I look carefully, I see the Nazuna blooming by the hedge. So can you feel the difference between the two poems? You can read them on the screen to try to taste the difference. Tennyson's poem is about plucking a flower, having it. Doing so may give him insight, but he kills the flower in the process. So according to Fromm, this is analogous to those who seek the truth by means of dismembering life. But Basho's poem is not about having, it's about seeing the flower without even touching it. He's not dismembering life and trying to understand it. Rather, he's enjoying being alive with the flower. He's not trying to reduce it to parts, but simply enjoying the irreducible as well as the reducible aspects of the flower. So Basho is becoming one with the flower, and his poem ends with an exclamation mark, for this experience is transformative and surprising. Unlike Basho, other people who walk by just see a flower, a name, or maybe a weed, right? So let's think about this distinction in more practical ways. Let's say that you're a student. As you learn, are you in the having mode or the being mode? If you're mostly memorizing information, then you're in the having mode. If you feel uncomfortable exploring new ideas, you're in the having mode. The having mode of learning may require work, but it's passive in that the human being is seen as like a receptacle for information. So the lovely photo on the screen illustrates this difference between the two students very well. Okay. Now, being learning is not passive. So Fromm says the student in the being mode reads beforehand and comes prepared with questions. The student listens actively and the information is not simply retained, it's processed and it changes the student. The student evaluates it and thinks about how to apply it. The student listens so that the mind is widened and enlivened. So here's a simple way to apply these ideas. If you're a student, read and formulate your own questions before a class. Think about what you agree or disagree with. Don't try to write down every fact that you hear in class lecture, but summarize the main ideas and the essential arguments in your own words. And this will take you closer to the being mode. Or if you're learning a foreign language, study your grammar and then practice by being in conversation with a native speaker. If you're learning programming, do programming after you read a bit about it. Right? If you are reading philosophy, again, slow down and think deeply to apply, evaluate, question, imagine. Okay, let's move to memory and see if we can get a better hold of this distinction. So what type of memory do you have? Having memory is mechanical, like a computer or a student studying for a standardized test. Being memory is more like free association, in which ideas and emotions are connected in both a logical and physical and experiential flow of being. So being memory involves free association, kind of like an organic dream sequence in which the content of the memory becomes grafted onto your being. So to apply this, notice that memories are not things that you have, they are things that you are. And this insight will also help you better understand the role of mind in physical health. Okay, Fromm next explores conversation. So when I'm in the having mode, I I debate to win. I want my ideas, the ideas that I have, to win out over the ideas that you have. Okay? Debate is like a boxing match, and people are often anxious in debates because they're in the having mode. Okay. The dialogue mode is closer to being. So you can see a popular chart comparing the differences between debate and dialogue on the screen. In the being mode, it doesn't matter who's right. We work together towards truth, and that experience of working together is itself a truth. Now, to enter this being mode, which is closer to dialogue, imagine someone who you love and maybe who unconditionally loves and accepts you. Imagine you walk into a garden with that person and you begin discussing even the most controversial of topics. So notice how you feel when you discuss it with them and how different that feeling is when you debate it with someone who you don't care for. Perhaps you can taste the difference in feeling there that he's trying to get at. Now, of course, there's a time and place for debate. Debate's not a bad thing all the time, right? But I don't want to let that mode of being or the feelings associated with it define who I am. Debate is important, and we must sometimes take a stand when it comes to politics or other areas that cause net suffering or happiness. But the point is I shouldn't be too attached to having right ideas, but I should instead lose myself in the process and recognize truth without stamping my name on truth, right? Now, perhaps too, I do not have the deepest truth because truth cannot be had, rather it can only be lived. The truth is lived, not had. So in short, debate and boxing are important, but there's more to life than these modes of existing. So let's move on to reading. Readers in the having mode want to know. They want to have the plot, the synopsis. They want to know what happened to the main characters. They may even buy Cliff's Notes instead of reading the actual book. You know who you are, right? That is, they want to have the story. But readers in the being mode are quite different. Being mode readers come to understand the person in the novel, and thus they have deepened their insight into human nature or gained insight about themselves. They experience the novel instead of having it. Being readers talk to the authors. They question, they affirm, they counter, they sense when the author is speaking from the head or from the heart. If the book is simply a series of facts, the being reader applies them, tests them, and so on. In short, the being reader organically grows in reading, while the having reader may only accumulate the information that he or she has for now. So how do you apply this? Well, in my life, I think it involves being present. If I'm reading a book, I want to be fully present. I want to feel and evaluate what they are saying or feeling in the book. I want to test and apply it. And this takes time and patience and kindness and imagination and empathy. And all of these traits grow as I practice reading in this way. So I recommend reading a book called The Shallows for how to experience this type of deep reading. But beware, it requires you to turn off your cell phone and computer. Okay. Now, some people recommend reading 3 or more books a week, and that's great. And there are some books that can be read in that way. But it's okay, too, to savor a book, to read it slowly, deeply, to experience the silences between the words and ideas in which the ideas connect and breathe and grow into your own being. Now, this is an experience that is becoming more rare in our world, I think, because we have so much abundant information. We're scattered thin instead of deep. Well, how about authority? Well, there's a difference between having authority and being an authority. A great hunter is an authority, and people recognize his competence for the task of hunting. So in a democracy, I may tell you I'm a great hunter, and you may vote for me, right? And thereby you give me the title. You make me the great hunter. But this is just a title, appearance, a name. As you know, the institutional structures in our modern world promote all sorts of incompetent authorities, right? This doesn't mean those people are bad people. They just aren't the authorities that their titles suggest. On the other hand, some people radiate authority. They don't have to give orders or threats or bribes to radiate authority. So the masters like Socrates and Buddha and Jesus or what have you, they've integrated themselves in such a way that they radiate kindness, wisdom, and authority, not simply by what they say, but by how they say it and how they live and how they think and how they feel, right? Okay, so how do I apply this? Well, let's say I want to be a principal at a school. Well, I don't, but let's say somebody does. To be an authority, I think I should first try to be virtuous and take all the required classes and intellectually learn all that I can, all the information. Then I should work as a teacher for many years and slowly move into stronger and stronger leadership positions. In short, I should become a principal, more and more a principal in reality, and not just gain the title. Sometimes we want to achieve our goals now. We stretch too far all at once. Perhaps it's better to grow where you're planted, much like a plant grows. Doing well what you do now will best prepare you for anything else later. Be and grow where you are is the idea. You'll never have the present. It disappears into the past instantaneously, right? Instead of having the present or having a title, I will become it, and then good, intelligent people will call me it. Ignorant people will only see titles and appearances. Okay, what about knowledge and education? Well, do you have knowledge or do you know? Knowing is not possessing information, it's seeing beyond the appearances that most people assume to be true. Knowing is not naming the shadows, it's leaving Plato's cave. The truth will set you free, not earn you a title. Doing is undoing, and knowing is unpeeling layers upon layers of blinding crap, right? Knowing is destroying illusions and growing organically, not accumulating dead information. So in the being mode, knowing is thinking and being more deeply. In the having mode, it's accumulating information. Okay, faith. Fromm talks a lot about faith. He's a Jewish person here, but he talks a lot about faith. So faith can exist in the having mode or being mode. In the having mode, faith is the possession of an answer for which one has no rational proof. And this type of faith is based on authority and often gives a sense of certainty. It seems to usually cut off thinking because you appeal to authority instead of deeper reasons. But in the being mode, one is in faith. One doesn't have it. You can be in faith towards yourself, towards others, or towards God. There should be no image of God and no name for God, like the old Jews said, because God is not an idea one can have. It is an attitude and a way of living that gives rise to the belief, not vice versa. So if there's a certainty in being faith, it's a certainty arising from one's own experiences, like Buddha talked about, not authorities like rabbis, priests, holy books, or Buddha's telling you truths that you haven't experienced for yourself, right? The original Buddha wanted you to experience these things for yourself, not just cite authorities. So the mystics in every religious tradition seem to embody being faith. Notice that it might be good to have faith in another person based on a set of experiences, but no scientific experiment can prove that you should have faith in this person. But such faith seems essential to living well, in this faith in other people. In short, there's a type of faith that's lived, not had. It's similar to being aware with certainty that I'm currently conscious right now, but it can't be scientifically demonstrated that I'm conscious with the certainty that I know it through introspection. I'm not sure that makes sense to you, but here's the idea. Faith is a way of seeing, a way of being, and a type of awareness that moves in love. You might disagree with this definition because all the faithful people you meet have different definition of faith. They have faith, right? But mystics like Meister Eckhart and others best describe this other type of faith, the being faith. It's a faith that negates ideas so one can experience being instead of ideas. Again, there's many types of religious people. Some have faith, some live and experience it. None of this means God exists or that God doesn't exist. It simply illustrates how being and having modes separate religious people as well as other types of people. Right? Okay, so Fromm frequently mentions love. Love is not a thing, so you cannot have it. Love is an act of loving. It consists of verbs, not nouns. Verbs like caring for, knowing, responding, affirming, enjoying. So you could research the four loves, but keep in mind that Fromm is interested in the deepest of these loves, the love that precisely is a type of being and doing, not the passive loves that one can possess or have. So we can apply this by being more verb-oriented. Don't be so noun-oriented. So for example, if you're married, remind yourself that you don't really have the other person. That's impossible anyway. Every day is a day in which you can be in loving relation with the other person. If you get bored with your lover and you want another, it's probably because you are focused on having instead of being. Having more lovers will not solve the problem. The solution is to learn to love one person. For Fromm, we don't fall in love. We don't fall in love. Rather, we walk and swim in love. And must you pluck a flower to know it? Must you have a woman to love her? Must you serve yourself when seeking another's good? not if you truly love, according to Fromm. So, to better understand this distinction, again, Fromm explains that having language uses nouns while being language uses verbs. Verbs cannot be had, they can only be experienced. Again, with love, the having mind corrupts love. You don't have love, you choose to love. The having mind transforms the loving man into the man of love. In short, it's sad to make love into this alienated thing or into a subjective experience that you have. The deepest love is a process of doing, a way of seeing, and a way of being, not a having. So, how can we apply this? Well, instead of saying I have a problem, say I'm troubled. Instead of saying I have insomnia, say I cannot sleep. Instead of saying I have a happy marriage, say I am happily married. Let's take it further, more clearly here. Instead of saying I am a mechanic, say I do mechanical work. Instead of saying I have a philosophy degree, say I explore philosophical problems. Instead of saying I am a scientist, say I explore scientific problems using the scientific method. All right. So do you feel the difference between these statements? Do you see why you can love but not have love? Indeed, the less I have, the more I can love. That's Jesus. Jesus, Buddha, and many wise people recognize that love arises in the mindset of being, not having. Indeed, we must lose life to gain it. We simply cannot have it. So with these examples in mind, Fromm now defines being. Being is the mode of existence in which one neither has anything nor craves to have something but is joyous. This person is one with the world. One with the world. He says the difference between being and having is that being is more about persons and having is about things. Furthermore, he says our society is focused on having money, fame, and power. It's not focused on being and the processes involved in being. So at this point, you can probably think of institutions that have become more focused on number crunching and things and having instead of persons and being. You don't have to be a Marxist to see this, right? But you might ask, well, can we not have a person? And I think the answer is you can have a person, but only if you treat the person as a thing. That is, you can be in the having mode towards yourself and other people, but that is a thin and painful way to live. Fromm constantly emphasizes this point. What he's saying is not new. All the great thinkers from Socrates to Buddha to Meister Eckhart and beyond have called for a shift from the having mode to the being mode. All the wisdom traditions explore the distinction between having and being. For example, the Stoics long ago recognized that we don't really have anything. They learned to be content no matter what the uncontrollable universe threw at them, right? They were content no matter what the unhavable universe threw at them. Okay. Jesus said, whoever tries to keep their life will lose it. Clearly, he's about being. Buddha speaks of the Four Truths and the Eightfold Path, which gives rise to this nirvana state, and the state of mind in which the grit and sand of selfishness disappear and a new type of love emerges and rules. So Buddha helps us become a type of person, not have a belief system. Epicurus too advises us to move away from the having mode to spend more time being with friends and being in silence. Socrates recommends us to harmonize our tripartite souls and to be a kind of person instead of egoistically pursuing selfish desires and emotions which seek to have states of mind and have material goods. So I could go on, but the point is wise people recommend the being mode, not the having mode. They also give you specific advice for entering the being mode. From the Eightfold Path, love each other as I have loved you, and so on. So let's summarize. There are two modes of existing, being and having. These modes determine how I think, feel, and act. In the having mode, my relationship to the world is one of possessing. I want to make everyone and everything my property somehow. In the being mode, I don't want to own. I want to be alive and be in an authentic relationship with the world and all life forms. I want to live from my deepest and truest being, which is not in the appearances I have. In the being mode, I come to understand that the best things in life must be experienced from moment to moment, not had. So what can we do again to enter the being mode instead of the having? Well, Again, there's so much you could do, right? Turn off the TV, turn off the computer, close your eyes, listen to beautiful music. When you walk or work, do it well and enjoy it instead of constantly thinking of when it will end. If you're inclined to Buddhism or some other systematic approach, then begin to meditate or pray in certain ways. Use more verbs than nouns. Do loving things instead of simply saying, I love you, though that too is important. Be a friend instead of having 1,000 Facebook friends. Right, read deeply without interruption. Turn off the TV when you're reading and the cell phone. Don't be a receptacle for information. Be an application and embodiment of life. Now, before concluding, it's interesting that Fromm considers the Christian mystic Meister Eckhart the ideal here. So he quotes Eckhart says the following. He says, he's a poor man that wants nothing, has nothing, and knows nothing. So what does Eckhart mean when he says he's a poor man that wants nothing, has nothing, and knows nothing? Well, the person who wants nothing is the one that's not driven by selfishness or ego, or what Buddhists call tanha. It's an internal orientation. It's not that he doesn't want at all, it's that he doesn't want to have. And he's eliminated a type of sort of selfish want. Next, he says the poor man that wants to nothing but also has nothing and knows nothing. So to know nothing partly means not believing one has knowledge of God, for God cannot be captured by a concept, is his idea. Rather, one empties oneself of all concepts of God so they can experience the real God, a God that can only be experienced, not intellectually conceived. Again, as the Taoists long ago noted, learning is unlearning. Doing is undoing. You're peeling back layers upon layers, letting go of concepts so that you can experience reality unfiltered, not through the distorting lens of concepts which seek to have instead of allowing one to be. So that's some of my insights from the book, some of my comments. Check out the book for more. Also, think about how this relates to virtue theory, Buddhism, and existentialism, these things we're studying in the course. And I'll leave you with a question or two here. Will you orient your life more towards the being mode or the having mode? And second, how should we structure society? Thanks.